Welcome to Show Me Sports Legacies. I'm your host, Jeff Crowley, with my co-host, Chris Hockenfels. And today we're talking youth sports and all the good and all the bad that comes with that. This is big business. It's $30 to $40 billion industry. And here we are out in Trenton, Missouri, trying to navigate this and give our kids the best opportunities and ways to enjoy sports and learn their bodies and learn what they can do in sports. Pretty hard to balance sometimes.
It is, and if you've ever participated in what is now such a popular way to entertain both parents and kids, and that is youth sports, and found yourselves in a Dick's Sporting Goods deciding whether you're going to buy a $400 bat for your kid who just went 1 for 21 in the last tournament, you find yourself wondering if it's all worth it. But finding balance, I think, is the key. Like a lot of things in life, as a parent, you want to develop your kids, you want their skills to develop, but you also want them to compete. And so, like a lot of things, if you play too many games, that doesn't help your kid because they need the skill development. If you just do skill development and all, you're going to lose the interest of your kid. So you got to find that balance. You got to do what's right for your kid and then let them enjoy sports, because probably the biggest key in keeping a kid interested in a sport all the way through till high school or college is, do they like it? Are they interested? Are they having a good time?
Teaching them how to love whatever that sport is the key, it seems. And today we're going to talk with Coach Jeremy Esry, head men's basketball coach at North Central Missouri College, and something he's doing with Green Hills Recreation Association, which I think is cool, the speed and agility team, and what he's doing with young athletes there, and some of his philosophies about that. And he'll be with us just momentarily. And then later in the broadcast, we'll bring back one of our old buds, Daniel Gott, who was on the original podcast, and get his perspective as both as an administrator who's trying to provide the experience for athletes throughout the school systems, as well as being a dad who's going through all that stuff. And then we're going to talk about that original podcast. As you recall, Chris, we talked about what we fell in love with as kids and what we aspired to, and why we love sports, particularly baseball. Today, we're going to kind of revisit that and see how that has changed as we've aged, as we've gone through different roles as coaches, parents, volunteers. And we'll just update that because we're a year into this thing with 28 episodes. Things change in how we view sports.
Yeah, and it's been a fast year and a good year, and enjoy every minute of it. And a great topic to talk about on this podcast on youth sports. So let's get to it.
Okay, we will come back. Coach Jeremy Esry. Okay, we welcome back to the Show Me Sports Legacy studio for the second time, Coach Jeremy Esry, head coach of the North Central Missouri Pirates men's basketball team. Jeremy, once again in 2025, led his Pirates team to the National Junior College Association American National Tournament in Danville, Illinois, their fourth appearance in the past 5 years. Jeremy played basketball at Penny High School, NCMC, and Central Methodist College, where he helped the Eagles make the NAIA Tournament Sweet 16. And he is an energetic head coach who develops players and teams during their 2-year stay at NCMC and employs an aggressive, fast break style play. And as we got to know a little bit about you and your dad, and we know now where some of that energy comes from.
For sure, yeah, and thank you guys for having me back. Appreciate it.
Great to have you back, Jeremy.
Hey, so we're going to talk today about youth sports. And we're going to talk about something that you are starting that's going to be fun to talk about. But I want to put this in kind of a context. And so this is just some stats about high school sport participation. And in 2021, not surprisingly, coming off of COVID, sport participation fell below 50% for the first time in the century. So from 99 to 2019, it ranged from 54 to 59%. So we're talking about a 10 to 20% dip in that particular estimate of number of kids involved in high school sports. And in 2022, 53.8% of children aged 6 to 17 played sports, down from 58.4%. So another 10% drop in 2017. So that was 1 year further removed out from COVID. It hadn't quite bounced back yet. Some of the things, and we can talk about any number of these. In fact, I want you guys to jump in on these things. What are the things that might impact involvement in youth sports? And one of them is lack of access to facilities or programs, particularly in rural areas. Cost. social pressure. Not quite sure about that one. Time constraints and lack of interest or knowledge. So, I think sometimes in rural areas, it seems to me we're pretty dominated by football and basketball, baseball, traditional kind of sports. And it's hard for other things to kind of wedge in there and get some space in people's mind or get some traction. So what do you guys see in youth sports participation? Anything recently that concerns you?
Maybe not. Well, youth sports, when we're talking younger age, I feel like I've seen great participation and stuff. But then when you talk numbers for high school teams and high school athletics, I feel like they've been down lately, and coaches are struggling to get numbers and get participation, like you mentioned. Wish I had a really good answer for why or anything, but I think that's why we're here today, is to discuss some of those things. So yeah, youth wise, I feel like it's growing. Everybody's excited about it. Youth to the high school and to keep those numbers. For some reason, it does seem like it's dwindling.
Sometimes it's hard to keep that fire lit in kids, and I don't know if it's because they experience failure, they experience judgment, they experience a numbers game, and they don't see themselves as being on the inside of those numbers. And we know junior high is a tough time. So
it is, and I think it's options too. What are the options for a high schooler now? And then when you go back, what were the options for a high schooler, middle schooler in the 60s or 70s? And so when those options are wide open now with social media, video games, other things to do, work, they take away from the time that a student or student athlete would have put into sports. And so I think when we take that into consideration, we have to wonder, how do we get kids back if we want that participation to go back up? And so we have to think of some alternate methods. And I think you start to see that now with kids playing maybe multiple sports in a small school, or different kinds of activities are opening up. Who would have thought 20 years ago that Michigan would have bass fishing or bowling or these other sports that are out there available?
Because they have the logos on the uniform.
Right.
That's what I want to know with the bass fishing.
So I think that's all because Misha, just like we do, see that numbers are dropping. And one way to combat that, to get people participating, is what do they want to participate in? If it's not football, if every kid's not meant to play football, basketball, wrestling, softball / baseball, what's out there? Is it drama? Is it bass fishing? Is it other things that we can make available to kids so they have options? The killer for sports right now, in my opinion, is the biggest option kids have is the video game, social media. There is an avenue there that keeps kids occupied, whether it's after school, on the weekends. And if that's taking up their time, if you tell a kid, hey, you've got to commit every day after school for 2.5 hours, and then games, and then weekends, and you have to make the commitment to that and put the other stuff aside. We have a portion of kids now that say, nope, won't do it. I've got other things I'd like to do. And so I think that's part of it. It's not all of it, but I think that's part of it.
Okay, well, this stat kind of speaks to what Jeremy was talking about. In 2019, 56.7% of kids aged 12 to 17 were involved in sports, compared to 53.5% of kids 6 to 11. 2022, those percentages have nearly flipped, with older kids dropping 4.6 points to 52.1, almost 10%, and younger kids increasing participation by 2 points up to 55.7. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic. Now, this was an article about parent involvement I saw in the LA Times. It was an article from 2024. This maybe has to do with what I was talking about failure and kids sticking with things, And it says early success in most sports has as much to do with size, hand-eye coordination, and speed than any innate talent. Comment on that. How do you react to that?
Yeah, I think, you're automatically going to be good or decent when you're young if you're athletic, if you're taller than somebody, if you're stronger than somebody. The skill portion of whatever sport you're playing probably hasn't necessarily set in yet with anybody. And so, yeah, the kids that are probably a little taller, a little stronger and stuff are gonna naturally be a little bit better. And they would probably have a little bit more of an edge to them and stuff. And you can see that dwindle whenever they only rely on that height, that strength or whatever, and they don't work on their skill set. So they go from being really, really good as a young kid and having a lot of success to where then everybody catches up with them strength wise, everybody catches up with them height wise, and they're not where they need to be because they haven't worked on those skill sets yet because they just were dependent on their God-given abilities and all that stuff. So I think that plays a factor, and then, that can quote unquote lead to burnout or whatever because those kids aren't having as much success as they were. I think that is a big force. And then you see kids that were smaller, but they learned to survive, they learned to adapt, and now they're caught up and now they're better than everybody else. And those are the kids that end up being successful.
And do the parents go along on that journey? I mean, do they think because their kid's big, their kid's fast, whatever, they're going to be fabulous at the sport?
Yeah, I think that depends on the parent. I think that depends on, the parent goggles and what they see. There's certainly some of that. And then I think there's some parents out there that probably push their kids and don't see that success. And so they keep pushing their kids and, realizing that, hey, maybe we're not as good as we are right now. Let's get better. There's somebody out there that is better.
We were always searching with Kendall, what was she going to be good at? Well, she liked swimming. Okay, we went to some swim meets. Clearly, she was not fast enough as a swimmer. I mean, there were like 2,000 guppies in the water, at that point. Then we did some other things. Dance she took to and got a lot of discipline and ability to step up on a stage, get pointed to and perform. But that screwed up her running because she used to run with those piston arms, and all of a sudden she's running with her palms down like she's stepping out onto a dance floor. And I'm like, what in the world are you doing? Why are you running with your arms flailing like this? So there was a lot of kind of feeling it out and maybe overestimating what your kid could do. And then, some reality would set in, and then you say, oh, maybe this other sport or maybe this other thing,
Well, yeah, I've got some personal reflection on that one because I had two kids and was a basketball and softball coach, and both my kids played basketball, but I was always hesitant to do too much, force it on them, and make them play, and they didn't. I still believe they enjoyed it, but as it turns out, both of my kids were state medalists in my wife's sports, which were track and tennis. So they took the avenue and of those two sports, and probably because my wife was a very good supporter and was very good at showing them without making them feel like it was so demanding. Sometimes those sports like basketball and football, it feels like you're competitive right off the get-go. You're in middle school and high school and you got to win, and there's a lot of pressure there, where those other sports they can develop into and are better for it. So, boy, is there a lot of factors that go into the youth sports and finding a groove for your kids, and when to be competitive, when to make sure skills are being developed, which I think we're missing out on, right now. And so, yeah, it's a delicate balance on the youth sports scene, and you just got to find it. You got to find it as a parent, you got to find it as a coach, and hopefully it'll work out.
I remember coaching fourth grade girls basketball, which is kind of an oxymoron. It's not really basketball when they're fourth graders. I mean, you might think it is, parents think it is, but everybody's backing people down in the lane because that's what the rules are. Nobody can steal the ball. It's just dreadful to watch and coach. And yet I was still muttering under my breath as the official walks by, messing up and not calling fouls and almost getting thrown out of the YMCA one day, kind of, okay, I need to reevaluate.
We've all been there.
Yeah, we have.
But, and then taking those same girls out the next year as a travel squad where we could actually develop and play against levels of competition that seemed appropriate for us at that time. We kind of had a 1 hour limit. We wouldn't go more than 1 hour away from home. As fifth graders, by the time we were sixth graders, we need to go a little further afield. These guys are good. So we go to St. Joe, we go up into Iowa. By the seventh graders, we're rolling into Lee Summit and playing the best teams in the city and those kind of things, which is a little crazier. but still it was part of that development of that group of players. Okay, so I'm going to give just a little background here about Green Hills Recreation Association, because we're going to talk about Jeremy's program through that. And they are dedicated to providing youth and adults of the Green Hills area opportunities to participate in recreational activities. They got baseball, softball, basketball, soccer, flag football. 740 kids involved in Grundy County area, about 300 in baseball, 200 during their basketball leagues, 100 in flag football, 100 in soccer. Imagine all the volunteers it takes to run that and to put that offering out there. And it kind of fits in, Chris, with particularly when we did the tennis episode. That idea was that kids needed opportunity. They needed courts. They needed adults that would lead them through. And Carl and then later Boz were summer recreation program directors. And even going back, Mike Arbuckle did some of that stuff. And so these guys filtered into the programs that were being offered through those summer recreation, a little bit of tennis. Not surprisingly, we developed a lot of great tennis players out of those kind of things. So this kind of led to the creation of something that Jeremy has just launched in this past month called the Speed and Agility Club through Green Hills Recreation Association. You want to give us the elevator speech about what the Speed and Agility Club is?
Sure, and it started kind of how we're finding avenues for our kids and all that stuff. And I have a young girl, and we're still figuring stuff out with her. And hopefully she doesn't listen to this in a couple of years. She's pretty clumsy right now. So there's a way, hey, I would like to make her more athletic, quicker, all that stuff. And talking with other parents, and Derek Miller in particular, who has some younger girls and all that stuff. He's like, yeah, I think, that'd be great. And then just from my experience, the best high school teams and stuff, they don't just start at high school. They have great youth programs, whether it be youth football, youth wrestling, youth basketball programs, but those coaches start at a very young age and start building a culture with them, start ingraining some winning aspects and all that stuff. So in my experience, like when we're recruiting kids and we're talking to the coaches, we find out that, usually it started a long time ago with youth programs and stuff. And we're lucky to have GHRA around here and provide all those opportunities for every sport you named. I think my daughter has tried that through GHRA and stuff. So that's great, and that's awesome. And then to just build off of that, I always think you can always be more athletic. You can always get faster, all that stuff. And that's something that just, I don't know if it not necessarily comes naturally, but you have to work at it and do all that. But there's not a necessarily refined. A lot of it's reaction, and stuff. So it's not just go lift weights. It's you have to be nimble on your feet. You have to move. You have to dodge stuff. You have to pick up a tennis ball really quickly or move quickly and stuff. And so we're just trying to incorporate all that with our Speed and Agility Club. And so we started a couple weeks ago, and we just said, hey, let's see if we can provide a place for the youth in Trenton and the surrounding areas, so we can come and we can work on getting faster. We can work on, our vertical jumps and secretively our conditioning and our sprints and stuff, but we don't want to just put them on the line and run and all that stuff. So making them more nimble, making them more athletic, but doing it in a very, very fun way. And then we always end with about 15 to 20 minutes of competition drills and stuff, which is their favorite and hopefully keeps them coming back for more.
And this is really the first year you've had an indoor practice facility that allows for that.
Yeah, it certainly is, and we're lucky to have that. This has been something on my mind even before my daughter was probably old enough to do all this stuff. But for the last couple of years, I'm like, I would like to do something this summer. When it first started, the idea, my sister, Jordan, she was traveling from Hamilton to Maryville every week for a speed camp or speed sessions and stuff. And that was more treadmill work, just a lot of running and working on speed and working on form and stuff. So I initially started as that, or thinking of it to do that and do it in our gym and for the Ketchum Center. And then once we had the indoor facility, I thought that'd be a great spot because it's turf and it's a little more friendly if you fall down and stuff like that. And so it's been really good, and we're lucky to have that facility for sure.
And a couple things. You talk about athleticism, acceleration, and deceleration, which is something young athletes don't do well, the deceleration part, and then just competing. And we've heard that theme over and over in some of our podcasts. It was just about getting out there and having fun with your friends and just going full bore.
Yeah.
instead of competing in the sense that we're keeping score and the parents are yelling from both sides of the bleachers at their kids and that kind of thing, just competing in the purest sense. It's just athletic competition.
Yeah, just most of our stuff is 1-versus-1, and it's in a fun atmosphere where it's, hey, if you lose, then you'll figure it out next time, and you go get better and stuff, and there's nothing hanging over your head about it. But I think competing is huge, and I hate to sound like an old head on this, but I don't feel like kids compete as much as they did back in the day. Probably to go off what we talked about at the very beginning with video games and all that stuff, they might be competing on that, but I don't feel like it's the same competing that, if you didn't have the video games, you didn't have social media, and you just went outside and did whatever. I mean, I remember we would play rollerblade hockey every single day, and we would get after it on there, and there'd be a winner, there'd be a loser. If we weren't doing that, we were playing tennis in the middle of the street. We were doing something to compete and to play all the time. And so I think that whenever we get kids in college, it's just sometimes I don't feel like they compete as much as they should. So we're trying to hopefully instill a little bit of that.
I always knew what was happening in my town, Lawson. Less than 1,000 people, so it wasn't hard to know. But Glenn Kessler had a barn, had a court in the loft, and we'd go out there and play basketball. Learn how to not to run into the pillars and things like that, but learn how to use a good pick, And then Scott Green's driveway, there was always a game, and I was usually involved in that. You found a group of people, maybe it was just 2, 3, 4, but always something was going. You were sweat moving around. And I think the idea of them having fun, not really realizing how hard they're working. I have to admit, as a coach, putting kids on the line and running them and watching their tongues hang out is way more fun than I should admit to. But I don't do it as punishment. We never do it as punishment. But they know that running is hard stuff. But if you can get them to run on their own without them knowing, and pretty soon, I'll tell you, we're successful. At least one of the young ladies came over to the bench I was sitting on with her dad, and she sits down. She goes, "I'm tired." And of course, the dad was like not hearing it. Oh yeah, take a drink, get back out there. And 45 minutes can seem a pretty long stretch of time if you're really putting effort into it.
Yeah, it certainly can. If you're going, as hard as you can for 45 minutes, that's going to be a pretty good workout. And we've had great luck. All the kids that we've had so far have been awesome in sense of attitudes and sense of wanting to get better and just trying their hardest every single rep. So it's been pretty fun.
Cool.
And they're developing a skill. All the things we've talked about are, in my book, skill development. These things can be worked on, improved. Not everybody's born a great athlete, but you can actually work on that. You can work on getting better footwork, better speed, better agility, stronger, and it just takes a little bit of time from some adults and some dedication, and we can make these kids better athletes. Now, something we haven't talked about is, can you go over the line on that? Can you go too far? And we start to see that these travel teams and travel ball, where's the line, but where it gets competitive, too competitive. And are we burning the kids out in the summers when they're 9 years old and they're playing 80 games and it's win, win, win at all costs and things like that? So maybe a topic for down the line a little bit, but I'm old school probably, as you know. I like the skill development first and then the game action second if it's a two-step. And sometimes we get that game action ahead of the skill development. And we're yelling at kids and yelling at officials because we throw kids out on a court and a ball and say, play basketball. Why are you traveling? How come you can't shoot? Well, did anybody teach them to dribble? Did anybody teach them to shoot? Did anybody teach them the game first before we just jump in and pay all these great amounts of money so we can go and, get frustrated?
Yeah. And I was going to mention that when we talked about the decline in high school athletics and sports, it has gotten to that point, in my opinion, where it used to be, if it was football season, it was football season. If it was basketball or wrestling, it was basketball or wrestling. If it was track, it was track. And then you kind of had your summers. And now it's getting so competitive with everything. You're trying to keep up with the Joneses because if one team's playing basketball in all of June, well, then you think you need to play in basketball in all of June. And they could just wear these kids out if they're trying to have a summer job and then they're trying to hit the weight sessions. They're trying to hit the tournaments, and they have a softball or baseball tournament on the weekend. And so, I think that could play a large part in the decline and stuff because it can get too competitive from that front. And it's, it's crazy. It's usually not the kids that are that are driving it. It comes from a competitive parent that thinks, okay, so-and-so's doing this, I need to do this more, or a competitive coach who sees certain school, a certain team being really successful. So in order to catch them, we have to do extra work. We have to do that. And then it's a snowball effect on everything, and it just leads into it. So, yeah.
I think it can wear kids out, and it can create injuries.
Yes.
I see that a lot. Kids do not know when to stop. Mm. They all think they've slept enough, they've hydrated enough, they're ready to go until they're not. Really hard to get a read from the player, and particularly if the parents are really pushing behind it from the players. Yeah, I'm tired. I could use a blow. I could use a break. Can I sit out this? Because that's when the turned ankles, that's when the other stuff happens.
For sure. And kids don't want to tell you no. They don't want to, they want to, they'll listen to you and they'll do whatever they feel is right and stuff. So they're going to push themselves.
Yeah, we had a time when my daughter was playing in the summer that we were meshing, as you said before, the softball and the basketball. So we had a traveling softball team, and we were trying to get a tournament in, like you always, we got to get these games in. Really, when the end of the day, does it really matter? Yeah. But it was a Sunday, and we had to get these 3 games in, whatever. So we had these 3 games we had to get in, but there was a basketball camp about an hour and a half away that started on Sunday night. So here we are as parents all scheming. Okay, as soon as our kids are done with their 3 softball games, we're going to get them in the Suburban, and we're going to drive. And then our kids had to get out, get their basketball, and then play 2 basketball games that night. And I remember sitting there in the stands after they were playing and thinking, oh man, my daughter, she can't go. She's hit a wall, and it's my fault because I helped scheme this thing where I'm making my kid play 5 games in a day because I think it's going to give her an advantage, and maybe it's not. Maybe we've crossed the line there, and she just needs some rest. Yeah. So, yeah.
We talk about the things that make all these things take root, and that's a lot of practice, loving the sport, and finding other people, similar capabilities for you to learn with, some positive mentorship, whether that's family or coaches or older adults in the community, and just available facilities. Jeremy, what do you think will take this speed and agility team concept and it'll carry over into other parts? I mean, what's going to be the connective tissue for them to stay with their sports, various sports, and work at it and enjoy it?
Yeah, hopefully they see by doing some of the drills and stuff that we do, hopefully just whatever sport they're in, it just becomes a little more natural to them. And the flow and how they move out there and how they glide or how powerful they are in jumping or whatever, hopefully that just they can see like, oh, I wasn't able to do this a month ago. Now I'm feeling a little more comfortable out there. Now I can get to my spots faster. Now I can change change a pace quicker or change directions quicker, and they'll see more success in whatever they're doing. We're just hoping that, it just becomes a little more natural to them, just the movements out there and stuff, and they're not as rigid or anything.
You have to allow for the different pace and growth and maturity. And, I was complaining about the dance, hands down, all that kind of stuff. Dance gave my daughter the ability to spin, which turned into her career as a discus thrower. And she just had a unique advantage because she had balance and things that came from that. So there's always things that you can bring into that. So sometimes I think that a failure to understand that this kid that has no knack might grow. The kid that is awkward might develop some agility and skill set. And then conversely, I remember, I don't know if you did this in basketball camps and stuff, and I went to basketball camp and, they give you your certificates at the end of the week, and I won one for vertical jump. Okay. I had a 29-inch vertical jump as a freshman or whatever. I don't think anybody ever worked on improving my 29-inch vertical jump.
That was the peak. That was your apex.
That was it.
Now I have a 2-inch vertical jump or whatever now. But it's just like sometimes there were things that were randomly tested. You would think that you would use them as a baseline and then develop them. No, that didn't happen.
You never know. We've seen it. We've all been in sports enough to know that kids develop different rates, and sometimes after a year, you see a kid walk in the gym and you go, oh my goodness, what happened over the summer? They're going to be a different player. And then sometimes your kids, my son, for an example, was really, really fast when he was in elementary school, winning all the Whistler relays and things like that, and ended up being an offensive lineman in football when he got older because he got bigger and gained weight and was strong and was no longer the dreams I had of being a receiver or a running back, that those things change because kids develop differently. And so you got to be careful. But the thing I like about Jeremy's is he is attacking all levels. You can be a better athlete, and that can translate into any sport. If your footwork is better, your agility and your speed are better, and your strength is better, that's going to translate to whatever you do, whether it's track or tennis or football or golf. Any of those, getting those skills early can only help you in whatever sport you decide to do.
Yeah, and we're really trying not to be sport specific at all. Like if we can get some kids that are big time wrestlers or something, like we're trying to do some drills that would help out with that and their speed and their quickness with, and then of course the basketball, football, soccer. I think the better footwork you can have, better body control you can have, it's going to be beneficial in anything that you do.
One of the questions I got after going and watching your practice the other night is, well, that must be a real clown fest. I mean, those kids can't be paying attention. First to third graders is the group I was watching.
Yeah,
I said, well,
you got to watch the youngins.
Actually, they were paying attention because you kept them moving. That was something I always feel about practice. Keep them really busy. Keep them moving. They don't know they're doing ball handling, but they always got a ball in their hands.
Yeah,
so those things are happening. Seems like they
Yeah,
They have a desire to learn.
Yeah, I was a little worried about that. I think we're lucky to have some other coaches with us, so you keep the group smaller where they don't have to wait in line and they don't have to goof off and stuff. I think that's key is you keep the group smaller, and then you're always doing something challenging to where they have to focus. And like I said, I've been really impressed with all our kids, all the levels. We have 4 different groups, 1st through 3rd, 4th through 6th, 7th and 8th, and then high school and college. They've all been really attentive, and they're not goofing off. They get station to station and all that and do a really good job. And that's one thing I think I'm not great with, the maybe breaking down a running form or teaching that stuff. And I wish I was, and I wish I could get better. But I do think there's a lot of intangible culture stuff that can be taught within these groups, even when they're young kids and stuff. Cheering people on when they're not doing anything. Again, sprinting group to group and not wasting any time in between or anything like that. Getting from station to station, listening to their coaches, just all those intangible stuff that I think can help build a good culture, which again, like we talked about, will hopefully do something later on in life when they are in 7th and 8th grade, or when they're in high school and they're paying attention to their coaches and all that stuff. I think there's a lot of winning intangible stuff that we can teach during this too. So
it's excellent. Okay, I want to close out because it seems like your summers are just as busy as your winters. You got recruiting, you got summer camps, you're bringing new players on campus, you got your holdovers. And so what's on your plate now that we'll see hit the floor at Ketchum Center this fall?
Yeah, we got camp coming up next week. So we have about basketball camp. So we have 132 kids signed up right now, which is great for our camp. And all our players will come in. Most of our players will come in and kind of help with that camp and direct that. So that's next week. And then it's just doing some behind-the-scenes stuff with making sure all the kids are in classes and making sure they're in classes for the fall enrolled. We still got to find a couple kids for next year, and so we're still recruiting and excited. We're going to be a brand new team. We lost quite a bit of our scoring. We have 1 starter coming back, and everybody else is either new or a little inexperienced, but we do have some guys that were great in practice last year, and they're ready to make their mark and take advantage of the opportunity. So, but yeah, we'll be pretty new on the court and see what we can do.
Anything, if people want to connect, you've had a couple of these sessions with your speed and agility team. What's the best way for them to connect?
Yeah.
Get to the next session.
Best ways, great question. Best way is thank you to Kara McClellan and the Green Hills Recreation Association and promoting our stuff and all that. So you can find it on there. You can reach out to me. You can call the Ketchum Center or stop by the Ketchum Center. Reach out to me through Facebook, whatever, and get your kids signed up. And we would love to have them. It's
Monday nights?
Monday nights, every Monday night until August 18th, I believe. So, and hey, we understand the summers are busy and stuff, so there's no commitment week to week, anything like that. If you can show up, great, show up, and let's get some work in. If you you have vacation or you had a game that day or something, then we certainly understand and not going to hold it against you. But if you're looking for something to do on a Monday night, come out, let's get better and build a little sweat.
It's a lively place to be. I recommend it. If you're a kid, I think I would have loved it. So, Coach Esry, thanks for the enthusiasm you bring to our community and its kids. Wish you continued success and hope some of these seeds you're planting blossom with kids having fun and success in a variety of sports.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys for having us.
Back in the studio and now joined by Daniel Gott, Superintendent of Trenton R9 School Systems and a frequent contributor on our Show Me Sports Legacies podcast. Happy to have him back. Daniel, earlier today, we spoke with Coach Jeremy Esry about a new program he's offering, a speed and agility club offered through Green Hills Recreation Association. And so thought we'd kind of spin this out to you about what Green Hills Rec programs mean to you now as a parent and this concept of how do you develop skills in young athletes, and maybe they don't even know that's happening because they're having fun and they're doing something. I went to the session Monday and watched the first and third graders, and they were rolling. And when they went over to get their water, they looked tired. And then they went back and had some more fun. And when 45 minutes was up, they had a workout and probably didn't even know it. So talk about something that you've seen or done or your kids have gone through, and what, as a parent, what are you looking for that activity? Maybe it's skill development. Maybe it's just attention span development. Maybe it's something else.
Well, yeah. And I think it's going to be different for everybody and for parents and their kids. For some, it's just to get their kids involved in something. Basically, it's even getting kids just to try different things. And first, I just want to say I'm so thankful for GHRA and the volunteers that come out and make sure this can even happen in Trenton. A few years ago, we had TBA, Trenton Ball Association. That's what I grew up with. Unfortunately, it folded. And then GHRA kind of came in, and that's what really saved youth sports around here and grew upon just a summer baseball league. So, for me, I've been fortunate enough to have my kids play in multiple different sports. And then I've been able to coach a few things from t-ball, softball, last year flag football, and even basketball a little bit. Thankfully, I had, Jordan Ferguson's of the world to really coach that sport. And I was just there to assist and herd the cats a little bit. So, but I think it's just so important for programs like GHRA because it teaches kids so many things. You're not just learning about the basics of a sport. You're learning how to be a team. You're learning in some ways patience, but also when to react, when to do things. And what's funny is, you're talking about Coach Esry doing this. What'd you even call it again? It's like a
agility team.
I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, to have a speed and agility and what a brilliant idea. And really only a college coach is probably going to think of that. Volunteer coaches, and I'm not sitting around thinking, man, how are we going to get our athletes better around here? And it's starting a speed and agility group for your first, second, third, fourth graders, but it's a brilliant idea. And it is actually parents like that, like Coach Esry, like many of the parents you see volunteering around that make GHRA so special. And I'm certainly thankful that we have it around here. And I'm certainly thankful that my kids get to be a part of it, even on those nights that I have to travel to Eagleville for a 7:00 softball game. Sometimes I'm a little bit cantankerous about that. But then when I get there, they have a great concession stand over there too, by the way. Check it out, Eagleville.
Good.
Well done. But once I get over there and the game gets started, you forget about the horrible drive to Eagleville and just remember how blessed we are that we have an organization like that. It allows our kids to play and compete and learn to love sports. Even those of us who are not great at them, that's how our love for sports started, was playing them and watching them. And so very thankful for GHRA.
When I grew up in Lawson, Missouri, kind of less than 1,000, there was one guy. His name was Dennis Zekel. And I swear he must have bought $1,000 worth of baseball equipment and uniforms every summer out of his own pocket so that we could play ball. And, at the time, you don't think about it. You're a kid. He's your coach. It's all good. But then you realize this man he was literally the GHRA of his time, Now, eventually other people stepped in and gets more organized and all that kind of stuff, and that's good. But, man, it was just a guy or two that kept that hope alive that we'd get to play ball. It takes a lot of volunteers. And, it seems like you see these organizations and they die, and then another one has to spring up, and then they got to find the bodies, and they got to find the sponsors, and they got to find the money to grease the wheels and make that happen. Thank goodness they did that. And it's a lot of times, I think, as parents too, in those early days of organizations like this, you're like, why do they have that rule? Why don't they let the kids play real ball? Or why don't they let them do this or that?
As someone who probably complained about some of these rules when I first really started watching and going as a parent, and really for my nephews and my niece first, it doesn't take you all long to realize, well, this is really the only way they're actually going to get through a game. And to have anything even similar to what basketball or softball or baseball or whatever it may be would look like. Everybody's an expert when you're sitting in the bleachers. We all become experts. We know what they should be doing. Even when you're watching professional sports, we're like, man,
right.
I don't know why he's doing that. I mean, we complain about that, but it didn't take me long to realize even some of those rules that annoy me, like, they make sense and they're there for a reason. And the big picture is, and it's hard for even me to say, is not always winning. It's learning the game. It's getting better. It's working on those skills that when winning really does become the most important thing down the road, which you get there. I mean, winning is big and why people play sports. I mean, let's be honest, but things like youth sports, really good coaches are working on skills. And you hear coaches say, listen, we got better. And that's what's the most important. We got better. You're getting better. You're seeing it. You're improving.
And what's part of the decision tree that you as a dad go through when your kid comes to you and goes, I think I'm interested in this? What gets priority, and how do you sort it out so that your family functions, so that each kid gets some priority of, participation in something that they love? But you got to make some choices.
Yeah. So we especially with my oldest daughter right now, we've talked about that a lot, because when you're a kid, you go watch one thing and all of a sudden, that looks fun. I'm interested in that. Well, we say, Viv, you can't play volleyball, tennis, and softball. That's just not going to work out. That we don't have the time, nor can you play 3 sports. So, and those are all the same season. So really, it's trying to get her some experience in a little bit in all of those, which is what we've tried to do. She's attended a volleyball camp before. She plays tennis in the summer in Coach Sager's tennis camp, and she's played softball for years now. And obviously, I coach softball and love the game. There's part of me that's always kind of hoped she would lean toward that. Her mother was a very successful high school tennis player, was a tennis coach. So I have this feeling I see where this is heading. I'm just glad that, and I'm seeing more and more of her get more excited about the idea of tennis. She asked her mom to go out and play. And so I am excited to see her excited about sports and wanting to compete and be involved in something. But it also, when she's playing softball, I can still see the love is there. And, eventually it'll just be something she's going to have to decide. And that decision is coming soon because, she's going to be midway through middle school. And as much as I would like to maybe push her toward one, I definitely want it to be something that she's passionate about and loves and wants to go do. And if you see your child generally wanting to go out and practice something, that's telling you a lot.
And that's just another life lesson that you teach your kids, is there's going to be a moment in your life where there's a tough choice.
Yeah.
And you have to take either the left or the right path, and you get to choose, and you have to live with the ramifications of that. And so we can't always do everything. But boy, I'll tell you what, tennis is a good avenue. You won't go wrong there, although you can't go wrong either way.
Listen, it's a sport that I love. It's a sport that I played as well. So, I mean, it's I won't be sad either way. And my niece was a very successful tennis player. She did very well. My wife obviously had a lot of success in it. If that's what she chooses, I'm pumped to be a tennis dad someday. So,
you see a shift happening. We know post-COVID, numbers were down a little bit in participation. Teenagers, it took a while for that to get caught back up, maybe.
Yeah. So, and there's kind of ebbs and flows in the sports when it comes to popularity, but we actually just had the report at our board meeting last week. Every one of our sports, but I think 3 are currently above the 5-year average of participation. So right now we are in this time period where we're getting a lot of participation, and that's wonderful because actually district-wide, our numbers are not going up. They're going down, but we have more kids being involved than we did a few years ago when our enrollment was a little bit higher. So that's a great thing. And so much of that, truly, I think we're seeing the benefits of GHRA, of these coaches who are doing summer camps and getting the youth more involved, parents who are allowing their kids these opportunities to go out and play, and some of them who spend a lot of money and a lot of weekends taking their kids here and there and everywhere. And I also think kids are playing more than one thing. So, we're not having a bunch of specialization. There's kids who are involved in multiple sports, 2, if not 3, in their high school career. So, and I think youth sports has been a huge part of that. But it's really great to see for us on the school level to see participation. When kids are involved, there's so many good things that happen with that. 1, let's be honest, you're more likely to stay out of trouble. 2, seeing what it's like to work with other people and have that team and that camaraderie. And those are things you just remember for the rest of your life. And it just builds so many skills that they're going to take on, because a very small percentage of them are going to go play after high school. So many of them take what they've learned and take that out through life. And your podcast here has echoed that how many times when you have visited with coaches or athletes who say, well, I learned this and I took this from my coach, or I learned this from my team and I took it on with me. So very, very happy to see our participation up, and hopefully we continue to see that for years to come.
Okay, so we talk about parental involvement, and it has 2 sides to it a little bit, but I love this quote. This is from a 2024 LA Times article on what parents hate and love about youth sports. And this is the lady's quote that wrote the article, saying, as parents, we get a taste of what the future holds long before our direct participation in our child's life necessarily comes to an end. In other words, that kid is out on the mat, that kid is out on the court, that kid is out on the field. We're not in control anymore, and they're kind of making their own way, and we have to learn how to observe.
But boy, it's a struggle for some of them, let me tell you. Oh. It is a struggle.
Yeah.
But that's what we had that a little bit in the wrestling podcast about how it was to be a wrestling parent, and how involved they get, and how into the match they are, because they have poured their heart and soul into their kids' wrestling experience. It is a weird dynamic that one of our themes has been that it's so important for parents to be involved. At the same time, parents can wreck it all, and there's got to be a balance in there. And the truly special moments we see all have that theme of the parents who are involved and help their kids along, and then we're able to step back and let them go and let them be successful instead of being too involved. I don't know what the word for that is, but it's a fine line you have to really, really watch out for.
Well, I think you just have to realize reasonable expectations. Like, you're 100% correct, and we've all seen parents who are so out of line and go so over the top, and really it's heartbreaking to see. But also, like, I've been there, like, as myself, where I've caught myself. I'm telling you, you really have to step back whenever you're coaching an 8U softball team and your daughter in 8U just makes this crazy boneheaded play, and you're like, I throw my arms up. I'm like, what are you doing? And then I'm like, oh yeah, you're 8. That's what you're doing. You're 8 years old. So, I mean, I hope that everybody makes mistakes, and every parent is going to it's probably natural for us to have these expectations that are a touch lofty, but it's good to take a step back and remember you're dealing with kids here.
Okay, guys, it's time to think back to podcast episode number 1. That was a year ago, almost a year ago to the day. And we've now done 28 episodes. Chris, you've been in on almost all of them. You've been in on about a quarter of them. But in that episode, we talked about how we were drawn like a moth to the flame, of sports. Now we're different. I mean, we're older. We got other responsibilities. It's a little different, but sports still kind of creeps into our consciousness. It still makes us feel a certain way. So,
well, I jotted down the Sierra Michaelis podcast that we did when she talked about the loss, not all the wins, all the points, all the success at Mizzou, but we talked about the loss against Jefferson. I think who they lost to 2 or 3 times to end her season, and that she came into the gym the next morning, got the basketball, and made the shot from the spot, and then kicked the basketball or whatever up at the stage. And that reminded me of being an athlete when I was in high school, of just that desire to be better, and that every time a loss got you, that there was a way to fix that. And the way to fix that was to put your head down and to work a little harder. And I was taught that by a couple of my coaches, that there's going to be ups and downs, and there's only really one way to fix it, and that's just to work a little bit harder. And I tried to instill that in my players when I coach, and my kids when they played, that there's an easy fix, and it's just to work a little harder. There's no other equipment that you can buy or fancy scheme that you can do or some magic potion. It's just work a little harder, and that's a life lesson. And I was reminded that with the Sierra Michaelis podcast.
Anything as a sports parent or something that you're like, yeah, that's the way I used to feel?
For me, it's just seeing my kids be excited. My son started playing flag football this year, and I wasn't even sure football would be something that he was interested in. And he had some success, and almost I kind of had to, probably bring his head down a little bit, because like right now you're just the fastest kid out there, and that translates well into flag football. But it brought a new love in for him, and he's so excited about it. What I loved seeing was him then out in the yard, and he'd have his football. I look out, and he's got his football, and he's just throwing it up in the air, catching it, and then would run, and throwing it up in the air, and catch it, and would run. And how many of us did that exact same thing in the yard as we're growing up? And I'm seeing this change in him that I saw with my daughter a few years back, to where, it's not about playing with toys anymore. It's about, now I'm playing with the ball. He's really taken golf now. He's loved watching his cousin Riley play golf, and now he's just taken this love to this. And so he's out in the yard hitting wiffle balls with his golf club. And so the interest is now starting to go a little more towards sports. And that's what I love seeing, that, they're not there yet to where they can really sit and take in the whole thing. But the interest is there of really enjoying sports. And
I remember that moment when my daughter no longer spent 7 out of the 9 innings at the little K. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I was actually in her seat watching the game, or at least bigger chunks of it. And I thought, finally, we're actually, rolling into the area where I'm going to enjoy this.
Yeah.
And we'll share that passion. This past year, I got kind of a treat when my daughter was a volunteer coach at Trenton R9. And I didn't expect that, but it just hit me with all the feels, because she stepped into tennis, rediscovered her love of that. Loved that. Loved it even more when she helped John Guthrie in basketball, because she would come home and say things to me that cracked me up. She goes, I don't really know what to tell him too much about how to shoot better. So I go, bend your knees. I go, good point. She goes, keep shooting. I go, excellent. Distilling it down to the very bare minimum. And then, of course, in track, where she has a lot of technical expertise, and watched her work with a couple people that were open to learning, and you could see immediately that they were able to master some of the movements and repeat the mechanics of it and have success with it.
Well, I had one of those moments too this year when I'm back at the school helping in 5th grade, and we're having an indoor recess. I had to step back for a moment thinking, am I really shooting baskets with one of my former players' kids who is now coming in her own and going to play basketball. And that was kind of a surreal moment to now see some of the players that you had come through the system. Their kids are here they come. And it's kind of that cycle of sports that brings people together, brings a community together. And now it's generational, right? Because, dad played at Trenton or mom played at Trenton, and now, daughter plays at Trenton, and we keep it going. So that's kind of fun.
That's cool. And I liked your Sierra Michaelis. I loved that episode.
One of my favorite episodes from the past year was your Trenton tennis episode. I mean, just wonderful. And, I've enjoyed playing tennis since I was in high school. And it's just, tennis is one of those that you kind of forget about how enjoyable it is until you get out and do it, or until you sit down and watch an incredible finals like the French Open, if anybody caught that. But that episode was so good. It just had a little bit of everything in it from, your great coaches, Carl and Boz, who they made tennis around here. There's a reason that those courts are named after them. To hear them and hear Carl talk about getting it started and how it started, and in a few of the clips of Boz speaking, and then to bring in some of those guys who have had major success, and tennis is still a huge part of their life, when it really just started as not too dissimilar to my son throwing a football to himself in the backyard or hitting a golf ball. They were just out doing something. They were just out playing, and it became something that they loved, then just kind of grew into this bigger part of their life. And you hear about these guys who were all on the same team and had this great success against massive schools. And to hear them tell the stories, Chris Hoffman and those guys who, they're not old men by any means, Chris Hoffman, I'm not saying that whatsoever, but that's been a few years ago. They remember so many of those details. To hear those stories and to hear those guys and the impact that it had on them, I just loved it. One of the episodes I've listened to twice. It was just really good. And it kind of is one of those episodes that make you remember why you just love sports and all the things they can do for you.
Kind of what the podcast is about is these legacies springing up from little seeds, small rural areas.
That's kind of what we got for tonight, guys. Thanks for coming in, Daniel. Appreciate your perspective as an educator, as a parent on youth sports. Youth sports is pretty alive around here, and that's a good thing. And that hasn't always been the case in the 30 years I've lived here.
Yeah. And again, shout out to the parents and the GHRA boards and all those people who spend hours getting it ready, and hopefully they understand how much they're appreciated and the great things they're doing for the kids in our community.
Unsung heroes, because there's, like any sport, there's got to be people that step up and make it available, make the opportunity available for the kids. And it just doesn't happen. It takes people to do hard work and volunteering and making it happen for their kids. That's where it starts.
Totally agree with that sentiment. And we leave us on that and want to thank everybody for listening to Show Me Sports Legacies.